Hello, and welcome to today's Security Boulevard webinar. My name is Landon Schimmel. I'm a Marketing and Community Relations Manager at Media Ops, and I will be your host for today's webinar. We have a great presentation ahead of us, but before we get started, first, a couple housekeeping announcements. First, today's event will be recorded, so if you miss any part of the webinar, you'll be able to watch it again on demand. We will be sending out a link to access the webinar on demand following the webinar. Also, we will be taking questions from the audience throughout the presentation. Use your webinar interface to submit questions into the Q&A section. We're going to have some time at the end of the webinar for audience questions. Also, we have a polling question today that we're going to find during the presentation. I'll remind you when that comes up. And additionally, at the end of today's webinar, we're going to be drawing off 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So make sure to stick around to see if you're a winner. Now, I'm going to pass the baton over to our presenter, Matt Irvin, to get started.
Thank you very much. Well, I hope everyone can see the intro slide. And what we're going to be talking about is the importance of and the process of protecting sensitive customer data in the contact center. And that seems to be particularly relevant these days as more and more contact center agents are working remotely, and it's really hard when an agent's working remotely to protect sensitive data. And what's that sensitive data? Well, payment data, credit card data, that's really the thing that comes up over and over again. So we're going to talk about some new techniques for protecting that information. And that's going to really revolve around pairing live agents with virtual agents. So before we get into particularly the narrow use case of protecting credit card data from a live agent perspective, let's talk about virtual agents a little bit more generally. They could be considered sort of teammates to your live agents in the sense that a virtual agent can really can get a lot of work done that's routine or sensitive. These are workmates that are highly efficient, cost effective, and highly secure. And so they typically live either in front of the live agent interaction. So we've all experienced IVR systems where, it's press 2 to get your order status, or press 3 to make a payment, or etc. But technology is always advancing, and virtual agents are getting more and more robust and able to handle more and more of the queries even before they get to a live agent. And then if you look on the right side of the slide, you'll see a virtual agent icon depicting the notion that they're often used after a live agent conversation to do typically customer satisfaction surveys or some other sort of buttoning up the call processes. What we're going to focus the conversation on today is the notion of using virtual agents in tandem with the live agent right, in the call, where the live agent's on the line with the consumer and a virtual agent's on the line with the consumer, and the virtual agent can talk to each party separately, and that's particularly relevant, again, for improving payment processes and improving security. So we'll get into the details of that, but just want to frame out that they can be used in these various ways. And, let's also, this slide sort of underlines a comment I made earlier that they're getting more useful in the front of the call too. So it's not just, press 1 for sales, press 2 for customer service. Nowadays you can really have a virtual agent that gets a lot done. And this data comes from one study out of MIT, where they concluded that 80% of initial customer inquiries can be handled successfully by virtual agents. Now, we find that varies a lot by industry and by company. We have clients at Plum Voice that get way more than 80% automation, and then there are some that don't. So it really depends on the nature of the queries, but we literally have some clients that get 95% plus automation, first touch automation. That's really going to go up, not down, right? I mean, technology is getting better, not worse. So, oops, I think this is, oh, did I skip one? Yeah. All right, so now let's get into the kind of the topic du jour, compliance in your contact center. Let's talk about the importance of compliance. Why are we, why are we, here talking about it today? Well, contact centers are a point of vulnerability for hacking, and so you really certainly want to be minimizing your financial losses, your reputational losses, right? I mean, what's worse, having a handful of clients, client credit cards hacked, and losing the monies associated with those. Well, what's worse than that is the reputational damage. When that gets out in the press, and there are potentially fines involved. So, there are real reasons to be PCI compliant, and we'll dive into those in a little more detail. That said, maybe we could pause for a minute and before we get into that, ask a polling question about your the way you're trying to implement PCI compliance today.
And to the audience, with this polling question, you're just gonna look in the polls section of the webinar interface here, and you should be able to select a multiple choice option so we can see what everybody thinks about this poll.
And while you're doing that, maybe I should have defined PCI-DSS compliance. Payment card industry data security standards. That's what PCI-DSS stands for. It's necessary as a merchant in order to take payments. It's certainly necessary if you're a payment service provider in order to process payments. There are different levels of PCI-DSS, but you really have to do it these days. And we'll get into in a few slides some of the fines associated with not doing it. So the question here in this poll is, all right, well, you have to do it. How are you doing it? And we probably should have had an option here to say, I'm not doing it, because it turns out a lot of companies find this such a challenge that they're not able to be fully compliant. So I guess if you're in that last category, maybe select unsure, unknown. All righty, shall we continue?
Yep.
All right. So, well, we'll see what people on the call say, but another survey conducted by Verizon actually concluded that only 28% of organizations were achieving full PCI compliance when they were going through an interim validation step in 2019. And we find that that's sort of representative of a lot of data, and we get out of the industry, that it's just really difficult to be fully compliant. So here's some more data points. Many of you on the call are probably concerned about cyber risks. Certainly, high percentage of compliance leaders are, 52% in this Gartner report. And part of the reason it's particularly concerning with contact centers is that, agents that do need to collect credit card information, what are they doing? Well, they're asking the customer, please give me your credit card. The customer has to read it aloud. So it creates a compliance concern for the consumer. And obviously, once that information is heard by the agent and, entered into whatever system the agent's using, then, there's a chain of potential opportunities for hacking or problems or fraud. Just turning off the call recording is one thing people do to try to maintain compliance, but really that's sort of ignoring lots of other links in the chain where there's vulnerabilities. And the reality is most of the cybersecurity breaches are caused by human error. So that link in the chain that involves a human being, whether that's an agent or a consumer, I mean, that's really where there are big opportunities for cybersecurity breaches. So what's the cost? Well, we've probably all seen newspaper reports saying, big company X has to pay, big number in fines. So here's some examples. Target agreed to pay $18.5 million regarding a breach. Marriott was fined $124 million after information was exposed. Equifax, $4 billion. So the average data breach costs the company around $4 million, according to the report from IBM. But it can be larger. And even if you're a smaller entity and you're hopefully not going to, face these huge penalties, there's still, smaller but significant penalties that you can face just for not being in compliance. So PCI non-compliance penalties can vary from $5,000 to $100,000 per month if your company is found to be out of compliance. And I guess the last point is, if you think about, well, what's the common denominator when someone is compromised? It tends to be that they're not in compliance with PCI-DSS requirements. So these are not irrelevant requirements tasks. They really, it is important to be in compliance. Now we're going to get into, okay, hopefully you're convinced you should be compliant. How do we become compliant? What's the best way to become compliant? I mean, the PCI-DSS standards are getting tougher. It's important to understand contact center agents themselves are in scope. So you have to follow various processes as you're training and managing and monitoring your agents, such that they are, fully in scope. Those processes are evolving. They're involved. They're complex. And it's particularly difficult to do that when the agents are working from home. So technology to the rescue. There's now an opportunity to really take all of that work and really potentially not have to do it. In plain English, you can potentially not do that if your contact center can be de-scoped, meaning it's no longer in the scope of PCI compliance requirements, because your agents are not seeing, hearing, or recording credit card information. And hopefully it's not flowing through your contact center technologies, in any way. And then if you can do that, well, will radically reduce your compliance costs. All right, well, how? So we have a Plum Voice, we have a product called Secure Assistant that clearly we're here to promote today. We're collecting payment info via a virtual voice agent that lives, is conferenced into the phone call. It's living with the live agent when the live agent needs to invoke it, and it can collect the credit card information and mask the credit card information from being heard by the agent and sort of passed into the contact center infrastructure entirely. So, if agents don't see or hear the information, if it doesn't go into the contact center, then you've isolated your PCI-DSS tasks to Secure Assistant. And, we're obviously here to be a high security, high compliance provider, so that, again, you've sort of taken the burden away from your contact center and placed it on Secure Assistant. And radically de-scope your requirements. So if you do that, we're going to get into how it works. But if you do that, well, what are the benefits? Well, what we're hearing is that the costs to really properly do PCI-DSS compliance for a contact center, you do it if you don't use something like Secure Assistant, we're talking $2,500 to $5,000 per agent per year. So if you've got 1,000 agent contact center, $250,000, $500,000 a year, and if you think about it, that doesn't sound like much of a stretch, because you've got to, train, monitor, retrain, manage carefully, engineer your contact center technologies carefully. There's a lot of things that do go in to really following the letter of the law with your contact center. And instead, implementing technology like Secure Assistant is a fraction of the cost. So, the punchline we've come back to is, once deployed, that agent and the contact center isn't going to receive sensitive information, so you don't have to bear that cost of $2,500 to $5,000 per agent per year to follow the traditional processes of maintaining PCI-DSS compliance. So let's walk through an example, how this really works. We're gonna set up this visual where the agent is on the left, the consumer's on the right. The agent's asking, it's talk to the consumer. It's now time to make a payment. There's a balance on the account of $195. How would you like to pay, et cetera. Consumer's ready to provide a credit card. And at that point, the agent can invoke Secure Assistant by entering a code on their telephone keypad. So they can remain in the call, remain talking to the consumer, and say, I'm going to invoke a virtual agent that's going to help with the payment processing. So the agent's not going away. But what's happening is virtual agent will come on the line, and it can do a couple different things. So on leg one of the conversation, the normal leg, it's going to be able to interrupt any credit card information input so that the live agent can't hear it. So it's sort of affecting that normal call path depicted here as line one. But it's creating a couple other audio paths, if you will. It's able to whisper to the agent, and it's able to whisper to the consumer. So whisper is a term that's often used with call center technologies where, an audio dialogue is not heard by, for example, an audio dialogue between Secure Assistant and the agent isn't going to be heard by the consumer. And so we can Secure Assistant, is not human, so it has the ability to have multiple conversations at once. It can have a private conversation with the agent at the same time that it's having a private conversation with the consumer. And actually, at the same time, it can provide information into the normal conversation that both parties can hear. So it's a lot of complexity here, but it boils down to, first, typically, Secure Assistant talks to the agent and gets whatever transaction info is needed for the payment. So, maybe the agent can relay to Secure Assistant that the amount owed is $195. And what's important to mention here is that this potentially eliminates the need for any sort of underlying data integration, complicated CRM integration between Secure Assistant and your contact center technology. So literally, the agent can talk to Secure Assistant as though it were, just an intelligent entity, and provide it with the information that it needs in the whispered voice conversation. Provided any amount of information, actually. So now Secure Assistant knows all it needs to know, and it can turn to the agent, or to the consumer, I should say, and point out that we're going to charge your card. Please enter your credit card information. That prompt to the consumer could potentially go on line one, meaning be heard by the agent also. But it's typically a whisper with the consumer. They have a dialogue with Secure Assistant about the payment process, and any number that's collected, again, is sort of masked from being heard by the live agent. And at the end, Secure Assistant can turn back to the live agent and provide additional transaction info, like a transaction ID. Very flexible as to what its conversations can be with the agent or its conversations with the consumer. And then once it's done its job, payments received, it can go away. And the conversation can continue on whatever other topics are needed. So, let's talk about how Secure Assistant can be implemented. And first, we probably need to set up a diagram, set up what is the typical call path to get calls into a contact center. They come from a telecom provider, and typically those calls will be sent from the telecom provider to a company gateway that's an SBC, session border controller, or an ACD or a PBX, so a phone system that the company owns. And then from there, that phone system will direct the calls on to call queues and agents. So that's the typical call path. One way, there's a couple different options of getting Secure Assistance in that call path, connected to that call path. One way, and fairly straightforward way is for the company's SBC, Session Border Controller, to simply bounce the calls up to the secure Plum Voice cloud at the very beginning before anything happens. And the Plum Cloud will just bounce the call right back down into the SBC. Essentially, it's as though the Plum Cloud were a telecom provider in a sense, in that it just sends a call back in the same way a telecom provider would. And then the call can be routed on into the contact center as it normally is. Another option is, and this is not uncommon with our existing clients, is that the calls from the telecom provider are routed first to the Plum Cloud, and then from the Plum Cloud down to the contact center, to the gateway, the telco gateway, and from the telco gateway into the contact center. So again, this is pretty common with a lot of our existing clients. They've made Plum Voice their responsible organization for the phone number, so we can work with their telecom carriers and get the call traffic to come to our cloud before it's routed on to the company and its contact center. But either way works, and there are other ways too if those two don't work. And I think we're on now to sort of a couple concluding slides before we get to Q&A. One is just the highlights of Secure Assistant. So what's it doing for you? I've mentioned a number of times that it's basically capturing, it's insulating your contact center from having to touch sensitive information, therefore de-scoping your contact center from the requirements of PCI-DSS. So effectively, that enables you to more or less instantly achieve PCI-DSS compliance. We are compliant, therefore our clients are compliant. How does it work? Well, again, it conferences into calls to accept and mask the sensitive payment card information, but the live agent remains on the line, and that's a significant that's of interest to many people that want that customer journey to really have a white glove experience, that the agent is there and can guide the consumer through every aspect of the customer journey. And Secure Assistant connects with your existing payment system. And I may not have said that before, but it's an application that can send payment information to pretty much any payment processor out there. And so you can continue to use whatever payment process you do use today, any CRM you do use today. Secure Assistant just fits right in and can easily communicate with those pieces of your technology infrastructure. All right. And a little plug for Plum Voice, meaning like why Plum Voice for this technology? Well, more than a little plug, I've got a couple big plugs. One is that we've been doing high scale, high reliability virtual voice agent technologies for years and years and years. That's what we do. We care about uptime. We understand that all of our virtual agents, not just Secure Assistant, but all of the virtual agents that we power are mission critical to our customers. So we really internally metric ourselves on our reliability and our scalability for customers that need to scale. Another thing that we take a lot of pride in is security, and we have for years. So we've been a PCI compliant vendor since 2013. We've maintained that and various other security certifications. And that's not trivial. Not all vendors can really keep up year in and year out with the changing requirements of PCI. We take a lot of pride in doing so. And I think the third distinguishing point is that Secure Assistant isn't just we aren't a one-trick pony. Secure Assistant isn't the only thing we're offering. And if it's something that's relevant to you now, then essentially you also get instant access to the other virtual agent technologies that we provide. So if over time, you want to improve efficiency and security by adding virtual agents in front or behind the live agent. Then we have templates that are ready to go. We have experts that can help with that. So, you'd be adopting a virtual agent platform that can solve your PCI-DSS requirements quickly and cost effectively, but it can also enable additional optimizations down the road. And as we all know, and again, technology doesn't get worse, it tends to get better, and AI-enabled virtual agents are increasingly effective, efficient, and maybe an undersold point, highly secure, at least in our case. So, I think you can continue to achieve efficiency and security in customer sat by adopting Secure Assistant and the other virtual agents that we offer. So with that, I think we can wrap up. And I don't know if there are any questions, but happy to take questions and talk further.
So that was a great presentation, Matt. Now we're going to move into the Q&A portion of our webinar. So if any of the live attendees would like to ask Matt a question, feel free to type your question in the chat portion here. We'll give people a couple seconds to do that.
Okay, so I see one. How long does it take to integrate Secure Assistant? Well, of course, we'd want to talk to you about exactly, your technology components, right? What's your telco gateway? That's really probably the key question, is what's your telco gateway? And we'd really need to, make sure that can be set up, that can be reconfigured quickly and easily. Or again, if you have another approach that you prefer, again, we're often chosen as sort of the responsible organization for phone numbers. That's super quick. We can have calls flowing into our platform, very quickly and bouncing down into your telco gateway very quickly. That's probably the long lead time item, is sort of figuring out the telco call path and setting that up and testing that properly. Payment gateways, we do a lot of payment gateway support. So we can facilitate that, pretty expeditiously. I'm reluctant to give an exact time frame because it depends just on how busy our team is, and it depends a bit on the client. But typically this could be measured in weeks. And if you're really ready to go, then that really helps us a lot. So let's see. Hopefully that answers that question. And by the way, when I said weeks, it's really not that the coding takes weeks. It's really more just a human process of having our team talk to your team, making sure we have all I's dotted, T's crossed, documentation ready to go, etc. Okay, introducing new technology or a new process into the contact center requires training of our agents. How easy or difficult is it to train agents on it? Well, I think quite easy. In this case, really it's, the agent just needs to know to invoke Secure Assistant at the right moment in the call. So it boils down to they need to press, the right sequence of keys when it comes time to take a payment. Now, thereafter, if there needs to be a flow of information between the live agent and Secure Assistant, I gave that example of the Secure Assistant is asking the live agent, what's the amount owed? $195. Well, in that case, it's pretty intuitive, right? I mean, we've all dealt with virtual voice agents, and there's not a lot of training required. And the virtual voice agent has error management processes. So if they enter the wrong type of information, that can be noted right away. So it's a pretty robust way to quickly pass information, does not require a lot of training of the agent.
Well, I appreciate that, Matt, and you gave a great presentation today. So that wraps up the Q&A portion of today's webinar. Quick couple reminders as we close here. Today's webinar has been recorded, so if you missed any or all of the webinar, you will be able to watch it again on demand. We will be sending an email with a link to access the webinar on demand shortly, and it will also be available on Security Boulevard in the on-demand section of the webinars page. Additionally, we have our 4 Amazon gift card winners, Ben R., Dave B., Glenn H., and Judy K. Congratulations to you guys. You're our big winners today. Thank you to the speakers for an excellent webinar, and thank you to the audience for joining today. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day.